The salt spray of the Sea of Cortez was cold, unnervingly still under the faint glow of a waning crescent moon. It was 2:17 a.m., Tuesday, October 28th. The date and time were seared into the memory of every operator aboard the two stealth class combatant craft heavy, or CCHs, designated Spectre 1 and Spectre 2. They were ghosts on the water, their low, profile hulls cutting through the black tide with barely a whisper, engines muffled to a low thrum that vibrated deep in the chest. Their target, Javier El Martillo Rojas. The Hammer. El Martillo wasn't just another cartel boss. He was Mexico's most wanted, a terrorist who had graduated from smuggling narcotics to trafficking arms, humans, and radiological materials. He was a phantom who commanded a private army, a man whose brutality was legendary and whose intelligence network was terrifyingly effective. But he had made one fatal mistake. 6 weeks prior, on September 14th, a high-speed boat linked to his organization had deliberately rammed a U.S. Coast Guard cutter during an inspection, killing 2 Coast Guardsmen. That act elevated him from a regional nuisance to a direct threat to United States national security. The president had signed the finding. The full weight of the U.S. military was now authorized to bring him to justice. The mission, codenamed Operation TRIDENT'S FANG, was given to the elite Naval Special Warfare Development Group, DEVGRU, SEAL Team 6. Inside the cramped, dark cabin of Spectre 1, Lieutenant Commander Mark Atlas Jensen scanned the feeds from an RQ-20, one blackjack drone circling invisibly at 15,000 feet. The thermal imaging showed the target, the Serpiente de Acero, a 150-foot armored yacht that looked more like a pocket destroyer than a pleasure craft. It was anchored in a secluded, high, cliffed cove on the eastern coast of Baja California Sur, a notorious dark zone, known for spotty radar coverage. Atlas, this is Oracle. The drone operator's voice crackled softly in his headset. Target vessel is dark. We count 4 armed sentries on the upper deck, 2 aft, 2 forward. Thermal indicates a crew of approximately 12, plus 1 high, value target in the master suite, aft bridge. Roger, Oracle, Atlas murmured. He turned to his team, 20 operators split between the 2 boats. They were clad in black, their night vision goggles casting an eerie green glow on their faces. They were a symphony of deadly hardware, breathing recycled air. Among them was Petty Officer First Class, Liam Racer Walsh. At 28, Racer was the lead breacher. He was quiet, focused, and clutching a photo of his newborn daughter tucked inside his helmet. Beside him sat Petty Officer Second Class, Maya Valkyrie Rostova, 26, the team's combat medic. She was checking the seals on her trauma kit for the 10th time. They were the best. "All right, listen up," Atlas said, his voice low and steady. "Intel says El Martillo is meeting a supplier. This is our window. The Serpiente is armored, but our intel says the hull is weakest at the stern dive platform. We go quiet. Spectre, 2, you're on overwatch and electronic warfare. Cut their comms, cut their radar. Spectre, 1, we are the insertion team. We board, we breach, we secure the package. This is a snatch, and grab. We are not there to win a war. We are ghosts. In and out." He looked at each man and woman. The tension was palpable, a live wire humming in the enclosed space. Time on target, 0300. Check your gear, check your mags, check your brothers. Let's go to work. Spectre, 1 slowed, its engines disengaging as it drifted the final 500 meters. The dark, sheer cliffs of the cove loomed over them like sleeping giants. The only sound was the gentle lap, lap, lap of water against the hull. At 2:51, the team deployed 4 combat swimmers into the 68-degree water. Racer led the way, his movements fluid and precise. They slipped beneath the surface, carrying heavy breaching charges, disappearing into the blackness. The plan was simple: place the charges on the stern doors, blow them, and flood the lower deck with operators before the crew could even register the attack. But El Martillo hadn't earned his name by being stupid. He had earned it by being paranoid. As the swimmers reached the stern of the Serpiente de Acero, Racer's hand held sonar pinged softly. He paused, treading water, and signaled to his swim buddy. He pointed down. Below the yacht, almost invisible against the seabed, was a sonar tripwire. And just below the dive platform, a shape that didn't belong, A limpet mine, armed and waiting. It was a trap. Racer's voice came over the encrypted dive comms, suddenly tight. Atlas, this is Racer. The back door is wired. I repeat, the back door is hot. Abort, abort. But it was too late. On the deck above, a sentry, perhaps hearing the faint click of the sonar or just sensing a change in the air, lowered his own night vision goggles. He scanned the water, his gaze sweeping, and stopping directly on the faint ripple of the swimmers. A brilliant white flare shot into the sky, bathing the cove in harsh, instantaneous light. Alerta, intrusos. The night exploded. The world detonated in light and sound. The moment the flare ignited the sky, 2:54 a.m., the mission parameters evaporated. This was no longer a snatch and grab. It was a fight for survival. From the cliffs above the cove, heavy machine gun nests, previously invisible to thermal imaging, hidden under radar, dampening camouflage, opened up. The .50 caliber rounds tore through the night, ripping plumes of water into the air around the swimmers and stitching fiery lines across the hulls of the two CCHs. Contact high! Contact high! Atlas roared into the net. Spectre, 2. Suppress the cliffs. Oracle, find those guns. All swimmers, back to Spectre. 1. Now, on the Serpiente de Acero, deck. Mounted machine guns swiveled and joined the chorus. The quiet cove had become a kill box. Spectre, 2, the Overwatch boat, peeled away, its own miniguns spinning up with a terrifying. The boat unleashed a torrent of tracers, slamming into the cliffside positions, buying the insertion team precious seconds. Racer and his 3 swim buddies were exposed. They scrambled back toward Spectre, one as rounds impacted around them, the water sizzling. A round skipped off the water and struck one of the swimmers, Petty Officer First Class David Finch Morales, in the shoulder. He cried out, a muffled gasp of pain. Valkyrie, already at the side of the CCH, reached down, her arm straining. Finch, give me your hand. She and another SEAL hauled him aboard, his blood dark on the deck. Racer was the last one in, climbing over the gunwale just as a volley of rounds chewed through the space he had occupied. He landed hard, ripping his helmet off. They knew. They knew we were coming. The stern is mined. There was no time for analysis. The yacht's engines roared to life. El Martillo was making a run for it. We can't let him escape, Atlas yelled, his face illuminated by the muzzle flash of his own boat's machine gun. Spectre, 2, disable their engines. We're going alongside. The mission had shifted to a dynamic, high-speed maritime interdiction. Spectre, 2, dodging fire from the cliffs, lined up a shot. Its 25mm cannon fired a single, precise round, striking the Serpiente at the waterline, targeting its propulsion system. But the yacht was armored. The round sparked, failing to penetrate. Negative effect, Spectre, 2's skipper yelled. Their hull is too thick. Then we go hard, Atlas commanded. He slammed his fist on the console. Helmsman, get us on their port quarter. We're boarding. Old, school, breachers, get your ladders. We go up the side. It was a nightmare scenario. Boarding a hostile, armored vessel, while under fire from both the ship and the cliffs, was a suicide mission. But letting El Martillo escape was not an option. Spectre, 1 roared forward, its engines at full power, matching the yacht's speed. The 2 vessels slammed together, steel screaming against composite hull. Ladders, ladders, go, Racer, despite the chaos, was first. He and another SEAL, Petty Officer Gator Harris, threw specialized caving ladders with magnetic hooks onto the yacht's railing. The hooks clanged and held. Go. 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 Racer went up first, climbing the swaying ladder as rounds pinged off the hull around him. He was a machine, his movements economical, fueled by pure adrenaline. He reached the top, vaulted the railing, and immediately engaged a sentry, his suppressed M4 coughing 3 precise rounds. Man on deck, clear. Gator was right behind him, followed by Valkyrie, her medical pack strapped tight, her rifle at the ready. Atlas and the rest of the team followed, a swarm of black-clad operators spilling onto the deck of the Serpiente de Acero. The deck was chaos. Cartel soldiers, heavily armed and wearing body armor, poured from the main cabin. The fight was immediate, brutal, and at point-blank range. It was a swirling melee of muzzle flashes, shouting, and the stink of cordite. Valkyrie saw Finch, The swimmer hit in the water. Take another round, this time to the leg. He went down, dragging himself behind a winch. She broke from the stack, sprinting through the open, bullets snapping at her heels. Man down, she screamed, sliding in next to him, shielding him with her own body as she began tearing open pressure bandages. Meanwhile, Racer, Gator, and Atlas led the charge toward the bridge. They moved with the fluid, terrifying efficiency of decades of training. They were the tip of the spear. Breaching, Racer yelled, planting a small charge on the armored door to the main cabin. He triggered it. The door blew inward with a deafening crump. The team flooded the opulent, smoke-filled room. It was then that the ambush truly sprang. From concealed panels in the walls, more soldiers emerged, firing heavy-caliber weapons. It wasn't a yacht, it was a fortress. Gator, the point man, was hit, his body armor taking the brunt, but the force threw him back into Atlas. The team was pinned down. From the cliffs, a new sound, the whoosh of an RPG. It streaked across the water and slammed into the CCH they had just left, Spectre 1. The boat exploded in a fireball, killing the 2 crewmen who had remained aboard, Petty Officer 3rd Class Sticks, Martin and Seaman Rook Evans. They were trapped. The boat that brought them was a burning wreck. The cliffs were firing on them, and they were in a firefight for their lives inside an armored yacht, with their primary target just rooms away. Racer looked at Atlas, his eyes wide over the muzzle of his rifle. "Sir, we're trapped." Atlas returned fire, his jaw set. "We're not trapped. We're committed. We finish the mission, or we die here." "Oracle, this is Atlas. We are compromised. I need immediate. Kaz. Danger close. Fire on the cliffs. Fire on this boat if you have to, but get us an exit." The voice of the drone operator, miles away, was chillingly calm. "Roger. Atlas. Stand by for sunrise." Sunrise was the code word for an AC-130J Ghost Rider gunship, which had been loitering in a high, orbit holding pattern 30 miles out, just for this contingency. But it was still 10 minutes away. In a close quarters battle, 10 minutes is an eternity. 3:02 a.m. The main cabin of the Serpiente de Acero was a kill zone. El Martillo's men were well trained, disciplined, and fighting on their home turf. They had interlocking fields of fire from the reinforced bar and the forward bulkhead. "Valkyrie, status on Finch," Atlas yelled over the din. "He's bleeding out," Valkyrie shouted back from the deck. She was desperately trying to stop the arterial bleed from Finch's femoral artery, her hands covered in his blood. "I need cover. I can't move him," Atlas made a decision. "Racer, Gator, on me. We clear the bridge. The rest of you, suppress that bulkhead and give Valkyrie cover." It was a brutal calculus. They had to get to El Martillo. Capturing him was the only way this ended. Racer and Gator stacked up on the bridge door. "On 3, Racer whispered, his hands steady as he prepped another breaching charge. 1, 2, 3. The door blew. They stormed the bridge. It was empty, save for a dead helmsman slumped over the controls. The ship was running on autopilot, heading for the open sea. "He's not here," Gator yelled, scanning the consoles. "Wrong," Atlas said, pointing to a small, armored hatch on the floor. "Panic room." Racer moved to the hatch. It was half-inch, thick steel, with a complex electronic lock. "Sir, this will take time. I need to cut this." "Do it," Atlas ordered. "Gator, cover our 6. As Racer began setting up a thermal lance, the firefight in the main cabin intensified. The SEALs were holding their own, but they were outnumbered. Then, the unthinkable happened. From the stern of the yacht, a second boat, a small, fast interceptor that had been hidden inside the yacht's hull, suddenly deployed. It wasn't El Martillo escaping. It was a boarding party. More cartel soldiers, fresh and heavily armed, swarmed onto the back of the yacht, opening a new line of fire on Valkyrie and the operators protecting her. "Contact rear," a SEAL screamed. "We're being boarded." Valkyrie looked up from Finch. He was pale, his breathing shallow. "He's gone into shock," she said, her voice strained. She drew her sidearm, firing 3 rounds at an approaching soldier, dropping him. "We can't hold this deck." On the bridge, Racer was burning through the lock. The smell of ozone and molten metal filled the small space. Almost there, now. He kicked the hatch open. Inside, Sitting calmly in a steel-lined room was El Martillo. He was unarmed, wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of brandy. He looked at the 3 SEALs who crashed in, covered in sweat and soot, and smiled. "Welcome, gentlemen," he said in perfect English. "You are just in time." He pressed a button on the wall. A siren blared. "The ship is rigged to blow. 10 kilograms of sea, 4 in the engine room. You have 60 seconds. Rasco's face went white. "It's a dead man's switch. It's tied to his vitals." Atlas snarled, leveling his rifle. "He's bluffing." "Am I?" El Martillo smiled. "You kill me, we all die. You take me, you might live, but you must be very, very fast. The timer is not a bluff." A new voice cut over the comms. It was the AC 130J gunship, Archangel. "Atlas, this is Archangel. We are on station. We see the second hostile boat. We are engaging." Outside, the sky was ripped open by the sound of the gunship's 105mm cannon. A shell struck the Cartel interceptor boat, obliterating it in a massive explosion. The immediate threat from the rear was gone, but the primary threat was now a ticking clock. 50 seconds, El Martillo said, still smiling. "Valkyrie, status!" Atlas yelled, hauling the Cartel boss to his feet. "Finch is gone, sir." Valkyrie's voice was hollow. "He's dead." That was the 3rd sailor killed. The 2 on the CCH. And now Finch. "Atlas." It was Racer, his voice frantic. "The explosives, sir. They're not just in the engine room. They're wired throughout the hull. This whole ship is a bomb. That's what the mine at the stern was for. To trigger a chain reaction, move, all call signs, move to the bow. Exfil, exfil, exfil." Atlas roared, dragging El Martillo. The remaining SEALs disengaged from the firefight, converging on the bridge and grabbing their HVT. They poured out onto the bow of the yacht. Spectre, too, their only ride home, was holding 100 meters off, its miniguns blazing at the cliffs to keep them suppressed. 30 seconds, Racer yelled, rigging a fast rope line to the bow railing. The team began to rappel, one by one, down onto the deck of the speeding CCH. It was a chaotic, desperate extraction. Atlas threw El Martillo over the side, where 2 SEALs caught him, and then prepared to go himself. Only 2 operators were left on the yacht's bow, Racer and Valkyrie. She had stayed behind to provide covering fire for the retreat. "Valkyrie, go!" Racer yelled, laying down a final burst of suppression. "You go, I'm right behind you." 15 seconds, Valkyrie clipped in and started her descent. Racer turned to follow. It was then that a final, lucky shot from the cliffs, or perhaps from a surviving soldier on the yacht's deck, struck Racer in the back. His armor caught it, but the impact knocked him off balance. He fell, his leg tangled in the railing. Racer, Valkyrie screamed from the rope. "Go! Get out of here!" he yelled, struggling to free his leg. 10 seconds. He saw her, dangling on the rope, torn between saving him and saving herself. He saw Atlas on the boat below, aiming his rifle to cover them. "Damn it, Maya! Go!" Racer roared. He pulled his sidearm and fired at his own rope, severing it. Valkyrie dropped the last 10 feet, crashing onto the deck of the CCH. No, 5 seconds. On the bow of the Serpiente, Racer finally freed his leg. He stood up, looked down at his team, and gave a short, sharp nod. He knew he wouldn't make it. He was the 4th. At that exact moment, a final, devastating RPG streaked from the cliffs. It wasn't aimed at the yacht. It was aimed at the CCH. It was Petty Officer Gator Harris who saw it. He was standing on the CCH's engine cover, helping pull operators aboard. He saw the rocket smoke trail. He saw it was aimed directly at the pilot's cabin. Without a second of hesitation, he shoved Atlas and Valkyrie aside and threw his own body in its path. The RPG detonated, killing Gator instantly. He was the 5th. The explosion ripped through the CCH, wounding 3 others and sending shrapnel tearing into Atlas's side. The boat's engines died. They were dead in the water, 100 meters from a floating bomb, with 5 of their team dead. 1 second, El Martillo whispered from the deck, bleeding from a shrapnel wound. The Serpiente de Acero erupted in a catastrophic explosion. The fireball lit the pre-dawn sky, a miniature sun that vaporized the yacht and sent a concussive blast wave rolling across the cove. The shockwave hit the disabled CCH like a physical blow, throwing the survivors to the deck. The heat was intense, scorching the air and boiling the surface of the water. Debris, white, hot fragments of steel and fiberglass, rained down around them. The night was lit as bright as day, the cliffs illuminated by the inferno where the Serpiente de Acero had been. 3:07 a.m. Silence returned, heavy and absolute, broken only by the crackle of the few remaining fires on the water and the groans of the wounded. Spectre, too, the Overwatch boat, had survived, having kept its distance. It now sped toward the drifting, crippled Spectre, 1, its searchlight cutting through the smoke. On the deck of the CCH, Valkyrie pushed herself up, her ears ringing. Her first instinct, her only instinct, was her duty. Wounded, she yelled, her voice hoarse. Sound off. One by one, the call signs came back, strained, pained, but alive. All except for the 5. Styx and Rook, vaporized with the first CCH. Finch, bled out on the yacht's deck. Racer, gone in the final explosion. And Gator. Gator was 3 feet away, his sacrifice having saved them all. Valkyrie crawled to Atlas. The lieutenant commander was leaning against the gunwale, pressing a hand to his side, where a piece of the CCH's hull had pierced his armor. Sir, you're hit. I'm good, he coughed, his face pale but resolute. Check the package. 2 SEALs were already on El Martillo. The cartel boss was alive, his silk robe shredded, his arrogance finally gone, replaced by the wide, terrified eyes of a man who had just seen hell. He was zip, tied, and bleeding. Package is secure, sir, a SEAL reported. Good, Atlas grunted. Spectre 2, get us out of this hellhole. Get Archangel to clean those cliffs. I want nothing left. Roger, Atlas. The voice of the AC, 130 pilot replied, cold as ice. Archangel is Winchester. We are going home. The transfer was grim. The survivors, the wounded, and the HVT were moved to Spectre 2. They had to leave Gator's body behind on the sinking CCH. They would retrieve it later, but the protocol was clear. Living assets and the HVT came first. As Spectre 2 sped away from the cove, Valkyrie watched the boat she had ridden in on, Spectre, 1's sister craft, slowly slip beneath the waves, taking Gator with it into the dark. The extraction was a blur. A rendezvous with the USS John P. Murtha, a San Antonio, class amphibious transport dock, waiting 20 miles out in international waters. The frantic activity of the ship's medical bay, the immediate transfer of El Martillo to a holding cell under heavy guard. For the surviving members of the team, the mission ended not with a cheer, but with a silent, heavy debrief in a sterile room. They were covered in blood, their own and their friends. The cost was staggering. 5 operators killed, 3 wounded, including Atlas. 2 CCHs destroyed. But the mission was, by military definition, a success. Javier El Martillo Rojas was in U.S. custody. His capture would destabilize his entire organization, cutting off a major artery of terror and trafficking. But that victory felt hollow. The real story, the one that wouldn't be in the press releases, was the one Atlas wrote in his after-action report, and the one Valkyrie would carry with her forever. It was the story of Seaman Rook Evans and Petty Officer Styx Martin, who held their post on Spectre 1, covering their team's insertion until the very end. It was the story of Petty Officer David Finch Morales, who, despite being wounded, continued to fight, buying his medic time. It was the story of Petty Officer Liam Racer Walsh, the 28-year-old father, who, trapped on a ticking bomb, chose to cut his own line, sacrificing himself to save his medic and his team. And it was the story of Petty Officer Gator Harris, who, in the final moment, saw the incoming RPG and didn't hesitate, using his own body as a shield to save his teammates and his commander. These weren't just sailors, they were brothers and sisters. They were the 2 a.m. courage that the world depends on, but rarely sees. 2 days later, at a secure naval base in Coronado, California, a memorial service was held. 5 helmets stood on 5 rifles, their dog tags dangling. Atlas, his arm in a sling, stood before the surviving team members. The world will know that we captured a monster, he said, his voice thick. But we will know what it cost. We will remember them. Not as statistics in a report, but as the men who defined the very meaning of the words, Not self, but country. Their watch is over. Ours continues. We will honor them by living, by fighting, and by never ever forgetting. The operation was classified. The details of the ambush, the heroism, the 5 lives lost, all buried under a simple headline: U.S. Navy assists in high-value capture. But for those who were there, in the dark waters of the Sea of Cortez on October 28th, the true story was one of fire, of sacrifice, and of a courage that burned brighter than any explosion.